6, we be in the mix with that rare candy paint job on the whip. I need food for the kids, money for the rent. Fuck a lockdown, baby, I can't do that shit. And I don't never vote, cause I'm fucking broke. And either way, I know the police ain't gon' leave me alone. On a plane, about to visit Glen Rock. Need crypto, told me I should bring the Glock with me. So I packed up my piece and I'm sliding. Cause we might get caught up in a riot. Middle finger Trump, middle finger Biden. Fuck a left, fuck a right, is you riding? Know you love to see it, dudes rocking. Ain't no politics, baby, we just talking. From the birds to the bricks, we be in the mix with that rare candy paint job on the whip. Who you with?
Okay, so in the spirit of keeping things paranormal, keeping things fun, tapping into humans' natural psychic ability, we have a special guest on today. We have Debra Lynne Katz, PhD, as I see right there. So that's cool. It's always I like having a PhD on the program, especially because people think this is just some stuff we're making up sometimes. But no, definitely not. So Debra, you've written books, and what else do you do?
Well, let's see. I take walks on the beach. And
Nice.
Yes. Yeah, we're into that too. Yeah.
grow tomatoes. I do run a school called the International School of Clairvoyance, and so I teach classes in clairvoyant reading and mediumship and remote viewing, and I'm also a remote viewer and project manager, and I'm also the president of the International Remote Viewing Association. So right now I'm organizing a combined conference with IRVA and the Monroe Institute. And yeah, so real busy with that. That's coming up in a few weeks in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up at the beginning because that's what are the dates for that? Just because we might release this at a certain time, and yeah,
that is August 10th through the 13th, and
okay, perfect. Yeah, perfect. That might line right up actually. Yeah, that's perfect.
It's going to be online and in person, and right now we're looking at having about 200 people there.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm just, if I look a little haggard, that's why it's a lot.
We look way worse. Yeah.
No. This is,
and we just,
so they fired our wardrobe. They fired our wardrobe guy. He didn't fit in the budget, wardrobe and makeup. So we can blame him for all of our looks. But times are tough. But so talk. What type of person? I'm always fascinated on the person that decides to sign up for this class. Do they have like instances where they feel like they've done something with their psychic ability, like where they go, well, I don't know what just happened there. Is that the type of person that comes to you, or do you have people trying to like debunk you that try to sign up for your classes too?
No, well, I would say definitely people have had all sorts of experiences during their life, and they're looking for ways to understand those experiences and sometimes make them occur more or get a degree of control over them. And so they're just looking for some guidance. And, a lot of times it can be really hard for people because, they talk to their family members or friends and they don't understand, or they've been shutting them down their whole life. So sometimes people are just looking for a community and support. And I get the whole gamut, like even professional psychics, people that have been doing this work for a while, but they're interested in expanding other aspects of their intuitive abilities than what they typically are doing. So basically improving on their skills.
Cool.
Interesting.
Amazing. And so one thing I like about you is I think I got into you from the RV aspect, and I saw you on Jeffrey Mishlov's show. We're just poaching every one of his guests slowly but surely, and
good guest and good program. Everybody should go to his YouTube channel. Seriously, Jeffrey Mishlove. That's where we first saw Joe Gallenberger. I mean, it's really great stuff on there.
But what I love about you is you're like a real psychic. You're into this stuff, and you're a remote viewer. It seems a lot of times it's either or. And it seems like, like people get into remote viewing, or they listen to an Art Bell episode. We're huge fans of Art Bell, the old Art Bell episodes, and they'll have like a military guy on. And I love a lot of those guys. Most of them are like seem really cool and everything. But, the remote viewing military guys are like, 600 hours, we acquired the target. And, it's very like, and like, and it's and a lot of times they're like, no, we're not psychic. We're not psychic. They're very like against that label and stuff, even though it's all kind of the same stuff. And so
Absolutely.
I got this book. I actually have a couple of your books here. This is the textbook, Associative Remote Viewing. Love it. I'm still working my way through it. This is insane. I didn't know a book like this existed for a long time. And then I was like, there's got to be someone that's really did a deep dive into this. And it was you and John Knowles. So that's cool. But then you have other like actual, you are psychic, that kind of stuff. And love that. And I like how you can switch up your writing style to be more formal and then be more the kind of the casual kind of talk, like you're talking in a one-on-one convo like here. So yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the differences, quote unquote, between remote viewing and just everyday psychic stuff, and how you can kind of merge those or do both if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know exactly what you're talking about with the military guys. I talk to them quite frequently and occasionally get a phone call with a little bit of advice, whether or not I ask for it, but they're very invested in the direction of the International Remote Viewing Association, which some of them founded. And
Yeah.
yeah, I remote viewing and other types of psychic work obviously are very related, but there are some major differences. And it really is fascinating how there's so many different approaches to this work and sides and different applications of it. And so, yeah, most remote viewers, at least coming from the historical tradition that we would refer to as remote viewing, they wouldn't just go and do readings on people or, just start channeling, spirit or say, oh, spirit's talking to me, I have a message for you. They wouldn't do that, even though they do sometimes have, spontaneous mediumship experiences or even alien type experiences, but they won't admit that because they're really trying to be perceived as scientific and separating themselves from all the stereotypes that come with psychics going back over the last several decades. But for myself, I started off being more involved in the spiritual end of things. And in terms of, I went to a clairvoyant training school. And so my book, You're a Psychic, is really teaching the techniques that I had learned in person. At the time in the 90s were only available to people in person. And I wanted to spread those techniques to everybody just in a book. But after a while, I did become familiar with the research that was coming out of the government, US government programs of remote viewing. And so basically the difference is that remote viewing tends to focus more on locations, on physical aspects of the world, even though that can include people because, obviously people are physical beings in the physical world, but it's not usually to read them because they want to be read. More so it's to spy on them or to help track them, to help find them, things like that. And so a lot. And then if you look at intuitive readers, they are reading different aspects of people, like their relationships and their problems and their purpose in life. There are physical components like, the physical health, or people will have questions like, where am I going to be living? Or, would I be happy in this location? So there's those questions too, but really there does tend to be this split between the different purposes, and then some different approaches too, like usually intuitive readings are done more verbally, whereas remote viewing is done more with writing and sketching and using tools like that.
We're going to get you right back to the episode, but I just wanted to let you guys know of a few other things we offer at Rare Candy Industries. We have a Substack with free and paid subscription options. Free subscribers get access to all written content. That includes Bob's Red Pill. That's the best thing going on the internet right now. Trust me. Paid subscribers get full access to our premium episode feed. And that's just every episode we don't necessarily want to share with the general public, if you know what I'm saying. Again, that's rarecandy.substack.com. We also have merch. That link's a little long for me to say right now, but go to the description, go to our merch store, and find a shirt that's right for you. We have Rare Candy shirts, Dr. Bronner soap label shirts, Rishi mushroom shirts, all types of stuff there. Check it out. There's got to be something for you. And lastly, check us out on social media. On Instagram, we're Rare Candy Pod, but on Twitter, we're at Rare Candy Pod 1. All right, enough of that. Let's get you back into the episode.
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess I got into remote viewing, well, kind of by accident. I was my landlady's boyfriend was like, yeah, I've been doing it a long time. He's like, I'll show you guys how to do it. And we all did it, a group of us. We're all still kind of friends, even though they moved away. And that I wrote an article about this for our Substack, but that night, one of my first targets, I had a direct hit, and I had never even attempted this before. And I always believed in weird stuff. I always had weird experiences. I was no stranger to that, but this was different because it was just like so obvious, and boom, right there. And but
Do you,
then go ahead.
do you remember what the target was?
Yeah, it was I think I drew it or redrew it or have the actual image on our Substack, but it was the target was, it was just a pure RV number on an envelope kind of thing, and it was a picture of, it was like 4 or 5 people jumping off of a metal dock into a lake, and you could see their backs, and they're all like either holding hands jumping off into a lake. And I drew a lake and like a weird dock, and then 3 stick figures jumping off into the lake. And it was, yeah, it was, and I was just like, what the F is going on here? It was pretty crazy, and kind of got bit by the bug since then, on and off. But I want to keep doing it mainly because of what a lot of people say, a lot of the military guys say, where it's just almost like a practice for your everyday intuition, and it just expands and helps your everyday life. And I do want to talk about the ARV. Like, we have an ARV project coming up with the NFL. We did one last year too. We're just having fun, but mainly I want to do it to expand awareness in general. We're not trying to make a ton of money or anything like that. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, on the flow of direction that way?
Yeah. Well, it is one of the really nice things about remote viewing is you can just have fun, and it is a group experience like associative remote viewing, where you're trying to make predictions about future outcomes like football games or horse races or things like that. And so, yeah, it's already fun to be making bets and wagers and predictions. And so to have that advantage, I call it just the intuitive advantage. It's not always going to work, or, it's not always going to help. Sometimes it could, mislead you. But if you do, it really, it can give you an edge. And a lot of people have used it to make quite a bit of money from it. So, a lot of people are interested in it primarily because of that. And then other people think like, oh, you should never use your intuitive abilities to make money, which I just think is silly, because, why not? Like, you could use your creativity or your intelligence, or any other part of you, but you can't use your intuition. Why would that be?
Yeah, it's a limiting belief almost, it seems. But
then you also have the people. I mean, we have some listeners. This is not. We didn't start this show to talk about Psi or anything like that. So when we start talking about it, there are some people, perhaps from religious backgrounds or perhaps just skeptical of it as well. They might say you guys are doing chaos magic or summoning things, or be careful, you can disappear into some portal dimension, something like that. And everything that I've done, now I've never actually done remote viewing. I'm actually the in our experiment, I'm usually the guy who just picks NFL games. I'm the control. But with everything else that I do, just a lot of meditation, a lot of the liquid luck, Joe Gallenberger exercises stuff that I do. I've never had any kind of weird, anything resembling anything other than pure bliss, to be honest.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
And then when I get back to reality is where I see all the evil stuff. So it's like, to me, like, I don't, what do you say about, I'm sure you've heard it before, right? The people that say what you're doing is pure evil, even if it is successful.
Yeah, we'll get random comments. So yeah, you're sorry to interject. We'll get random comments to just be like, be careful. We always get these be carefuls, And I kind of get, we are dealing with forces that we're not totally aware of on this earth, but yeah, we're always getting warned. And what do you think about the warnings? And
yeah, well, people really don't understand this, and they are programmed by their religious leaders who, just equate anything psychic with the devil and evil. And the thing is, if you are, let's say, like doing drugs, hanging out with angry people, going to places where just people are really angry, that's where you're vulnerable to pick up attachments and to get into different trouble. Now, if you're already like into, like, let's say a lifestyle like that, and heavy drugs, drinking, and anger, and if you're already into that, and then you start like getting into psychic stuff, then you could tap into things that just like living people who you wouldn't really want to take home to your mom. It's the same thing. You wouldn't want to take home some of these spirits to your mom either.
Yeah.
So, but I kind of equate a lot of what happens just in regular life to what we're dealing with in these other realms, or the spirit world. So, if your intention is to stay healthy, to really set boundaries with people, and to always surround yourself with, positive people, caring people, you're going to be fine overall. And sometimes people will get attachments. There's so many people who just move into a house, and there's spirits around, and it's not a matter of even they're into this or not, they're impacted, and people are impacted psychically by each other all the time. So I feel like, for me, that is one of my biggest messages I want people to know, is that we're being psychic all the time. Our thoughts are not just our own thoughts. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. And our emotions and our body sensations are not always just coming from ourselves. And this is true of everyone. So really, it's a question of awareness, and how much awareness do you want to have going through life? Like, do you want to still be impacted by whether other people or spirits, and have just not know about it, so then there's nothing you could do about it? Or do you want to have some awareness, and then you have, at least a much larger degree of control over it?
Yeah, and you're very in your psychic books, you go through a lot of grounding exercises and things like that to really, which I think that's a sign of a good, like a responsible psychic or intuitive, is teaching people how to do it in a way, not like the Aleister Crowley way, where it's all like woo, like it's a little crazy and you're kind of ungrounded and it's real, but also like it can get weird, and so yeah, I think that's important. And
Yeah.
we take a lot of reishi mushroom. I think that helps too. Just kind of just cleanses, keeps the spirit pure and everything. And so I thought that was an awesome question and answer.
Yeah, for me, it's all about technique and approach, and what do you do with your mind and your body and your intention to have the effect that you want. And for years, I was always interested in these topics. I have an identical twin sister, and we were very fascinated because we always had like different telepathic experiences going on when we were really young. But any sources that we would read, we couldn't find like how to get control over this, whether you want to stop it, whether you want to start it, increase it, enhance it. And that's really where once I found some techniques that really worked, I really wanted to share them with the whole world, because I was like, it doesn't just help to say, oh, just be open to this and it'll happen. No, there's things that you need to do to like refocus your attention in your mind, and then you can start to raise your awareness to all of this and really have a chance to get control over it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think what you said is just creating like a healthy baseline before you get into stuff like this. I think that's 100% true. I even would say that every time I am living healthy, doing what I need to do, I tend to gravitate towards this. So it feels like I'm being pushed this way almost in a sense, like, okay, this type of stuff looks good. Now when I'm in, definitely not when I'm overworked, when I'm eating poorly and things like that, I tend to do more destructive things. I don't want to dramatize anything, but just more destructive things to the self. And I think that's what a lot of people think, that a lot of people think that there are people that destroy themselves and then look to psychic powers to rebound from it. But it perhaps there's a bridge that can be made there. But I think the way you've said it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, there's people that are going to misuse any tool out there, or, if someone's going about like trying to exert control or power over other people and in an appropriate way, if they're going to do that any way they can. And yes, there are some people who will use their psychic abilities to do that. And unfortunately, that has happened. And I truly believe that, like, when you hear about psychic scammers, or, I've had plenty of people come to me and say, oh, I went to this psychic like on the street corner, and she told me I had a curse, and I paid her $2,000, and then said I still, the curse was going to come back if I didn't pay her another $2,000, and like asking me, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you should call the police. This is like, you should, get your money back. And
Yeah.
but this happens all the time. And it's not just like street corner psychics. I had a student who met some guy in Puerto Rico who was a spiritual teacher. And before she knew it, she'd given him like $100,000. And, she, at first, like I hadn't heard from her in a while. She had stopped coming to a class. And then she said, yeah, he told me, stop doing everything else I was doing. And she said this to me, I thought it was so great because he wanted to have phone calls with me every day. And he's doing healings on me every day. I was like, why would anybody, first of all, you don't need healings every day. You don't need some guy to be calling you every day. And then you're giving him all this money. Like, that there should be some warning signs there. But you could even translate that to religious leaders. Is it right for the leader of any church to say, give me 10% of your income or you'll go to hell? I don't know if they put it that straightforward, but what are people getting in exchange? And maybe they're getting a lot. It's not for me to judge, what people put value on the spiritual guidance they get, but there is so much of that. And those psychics that are able to draw people in, they're not just, they're frauds, in the sense of, anyone who scams someone is a fraud, but they wouldn't be as successful as they are a lot of times if they weren't really psychic, so they're telling people some things that are true and giving them enough information so the person's like, oh my gosh, this psychic is really talented. There has to be some level there. And so this can be really, it can be misused, for sure, just like any other human ability.
Yeah, absolutely. So now what's your story though? How did you get into all this? It's hard for me to think that a lot of people are just born into families that support this kind of stuff. So, how did you get to where you are?
Yeah, it really was having a twin sister. I think that was it. But, I was having experiences even when I was just a few years old of like feeling emotions and hearing thoughts like from my sister or other people, and seeing apparitions in my parents' bedroom. And my sister would see the same things even when I hadn't told her. She would come and say she had seen the same thing. So this was just part of our life. We were constantly reading books about these topics and talking about them, and sleepover parties with our friends, playing light as a feather, stiff as a board, and things like where one time we lifted our friend like a pretty chubby girl with just like one finger. We were able to lift her like way over our heads, like no weight whatsoever. And then we were like, oh my gosh, well, I can't believe this. And then we just dropped her. But experiences like that where we just even like I remember like we'd see weeds planted outside and they would be like a strange looking shape, and we were convinced they were from outer space. And so, we had some of that going on, but we were just always so fascinated. So yeah, I don't ever remember a time where this wasn't so much part of my life. But again, it wasn't until I was in my later, probably 27, 28, when I discovered I was living in the Bay Area actually. And I discovered the Berkeley Psychic Institute, which was founded by a man named Louis Bostwick in the 1960s. And yeah, I just started taking classes, and pretty much I was actually a federal probation officer at that time. And I just started going to class like every single day, 7 days a week. And it just really totally transformed me and made
Mm.
me realize I do not want to be a probation officer or, controlling people's lives or anything like that. And so I just left that job, and much to the disappointment of my mother, she still isn't over it like 30 years later. But I left and then decided I was going to devote myself to my spiritual abilities.
Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said about the twin sister. I was just researching like an author for our fiction program, and the author, the famous sci-fi author Philip K. Dick, had said he had a twin sister who they were both born premature. The sister didn't really make it past a year, but his whole life he felt like the pain from her. I mean, you figure that he's a year old when she dies, like, and just felt the pain. I mean, he had the opposite. He had the opposite of what you had. It affected him in a negative way, but it's just the fact that connection. And he called it was the phantom twin, I think, is the actual term for it. It's that alone is so. I don't know. How could it not? How could we not have these forces? I don't understand. I never understood. I don't even have regular brothers or sisters, let alone twins. So that's always so foreign to me. But the twin sister, are you still close with her?
Yeah, we have our ups and downs, but we talk fairly regularly. And yeah, when I can still feel her, like when something's going wrong, or if she's mad at me for something, I can feel that I get like a pain on top of my head right before she calls. So that can be a little annoying. I used to get really anxious. And so and I tend not to be, or at least I'm not aware of it if I am, but I would just be, fine. And then suddenly I would be overcome with anxiety, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? And then sure enough, the phone would ring, and the first thing she says is, I'm so anxious, I don't know what to do. And so it was enough things like that that really convinced me, like, yeah, I am really, I am so impacted by her. And it's not just her, I found that like in different relationships, people I'm dating, and my spouse now, I can be, really impacted, by a whole range of emotions. So, it's not always good to be that sensitive, because, it's you've got enough of your own stuff going on, you don't need
Right.
everybody else's. But I think that's where the awareness part comes in, because now at least I've learned to understand my baseline, so I can feel like, okay, I'm just fine, and now like a second later something's kind of off, and I don't always know the difference between my stuff and other people's, but sometimes it's pretty clear.
Wow.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I know some people who are. I don't know if I have it quite just yet, but I know some people. It always happens to be women. I think the women's intuition thing, there's something to it as far as just being sensitive to all sorts of energies and stuff. And they'll say it. They go, "Hey, the happiest days are the happiest days, but some days I just feel off and I don't know why." And yeah, it's just it's too bad you can't turn it off and on sometimes, right?
Yeah, there are things you can do, to different exercises like visualizations, even just like, say you're talking to someone that's like really angry or really upset, like just visualizing something in between the two of you, like a flower or a shield or something, and also just being aware of your auric field, and just saying like, I'm going to pull my aura around me and see like them backing up or grounding yourself. I've found like you could just do those things, and whether you're actually influencing the energy or you're just mentally doing some kind of separation, those kinds of things help, and then they make it easier to be able to deal with people when they're having their emotion, because sometimes like it can get really tricky, like in a relationship, if you're having an argument, because you've got your own feelings going
Right.
on. But I found at times, like if I'm having an argument with my spouse and he's angry, like I may just suddenly like have that going through me, and like I'll get like super kind of almost like feeling out of control, like I want to, throw something or break something. And that's not usually, how I am. And, then I might find that he was just feeling that, so it's like the emotion starts bouncing off each other and things can escalate really, really quickly. So, one thing I found is just, it is helpful to just like get physical distance too, when that's going on, just like, one person go outside and just have that space and then kind of sort out all those emotions. And I hear from so many people, I would say that like, this is about our empathic abilities. And yeah, like you said, so many women, some men as well. But I would say the majority of people I hear from, like that first and foremost, feeling each other's emotions and sensations and things, that is like the number one, like the most common intuitive ability, I would say. Well, I don't know if you want to call it an ability or just like a sense, because it's not necessarily like a skill, but you can make use of it then. That's like for healers or, for therapists, it's useful to, just be talking to someone. And if you just suddenly like get a feeling of like you suddenly want to cry, that could be really beneficial to be like, say to your client, like, oh, are you feeling really sad right now? And, they're going to be like, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And now, so if I go to your class, what does a day at your class look like? Well, I mean, what do I show up with, a notebook and a pencil? I mean, what do I? It's not like a normal school, the desks, chalkboard. No, none of that.
Multiple choice tests. Yeah.
Well, I do a lot of my teaching online right now, though sometimes I do in-person workshops, but whether it's an in-person workshop or online, I actually almost don't allow notepads and pencils because I want, except for remote viewing, that's a little different, but a lot of times I want people to just go within. And so for my clairvoyant classes, like they're supposed to be a meditation the whole time. And I mean, it's active,
Nice.
They're not just sitting there quiet. I'm talking, they're talking, I'm leading them through exercises, and then they go and practice on each other. So they're always doing something, but it's all internal. It's like totally shutting out the rest of the world. So for my online classes, we don't even do video because I don't want like any visual cues, visual distractions. I don't want people to, be focused on what they look like or other people. I want them to see each other like spiritually and intuitively. So it is really different than that. And a lot of people really like that. Occasionally I'll have someone come in and be like, oh, well, don't you know how to use a camera? Or, why haven't you like typed out all your notes and your, and I'm like, no, that's not how I work. I like to work intuitively. So I know what we're going to eventually cover because I know what I'm going for. I want people to leave any class with the tools so they can go and practice on their own and they don't need to rely on a teacher. So I know where we're going, but a lot of it is, I think of it like I teach intuitively. So I know some of the things we're going to cover, but sometimes I might just make up a meditation on the spot or, choose something that I know the people are going to need right in that moment. And that keeps it interesting. Sometimes it's a little tough for me because I'm like, some days I know exactly what we're going to do. And other days I'm just like, well, I'm going to show up and we'll find out, I'll find out too what we're going to do when I see, what I happen to channel here. And sometimes those are the most powerful classes, but, it's a little bit, can make me a little nervous if I'm not sure what's going to happen. But so, yeah, it's very different, I would say.
Well, that's cool because that's an organic process, and it'd be weirder if it was more rigid and you had everything by the book all the time, because that would kind of be antithetical to what this whole thing is about, I feel. So I bet people appreciate that it is kind of, an organic process. Everything is different. It's a two-way street going back and forth. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to talk? Could we dig in a little bit into the ARV?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd love to. Okay, so just to
That's
prime you,
associative remote viewing, is that?
Yeah, associative remote viewing. Yeah. Well, let me just explain to any audience members that are listening that don't know what that is. That's remote viewing using your intuitive and psychic abilities to determine a target, usually a picture, and associative, in an envelope that you've never seen before, and kind of getting the gestalt or the vibe of what that whole thing is. It might be very accurate. You might get a direct hit, like I talked about before, or associative remote viewing, where you're choosing usually a binary outcome, like who's going to win the football game on Sunday afternoon. Kansas City Chiefs or the Raiders or whatever. And then you picking two targets, picking two images, and then having the target be the winner of that game, and reviewing it in advance, either alone or as part of a group and everything like that. Now, you literally wrote the textbooks on it, Associative Remote Viewing. Yeah, great book. Check this out. Again, I didn't even know this book existed. I feel like I manifested it in my own personal world. I was like, I need something like a textbook, and then I had never heard of it until boom, here it is. And so last season, we did a little. It was mainly I was publishing it. But it was mainly my girlfriend and I. My girlfriend would pick targets for football games. I would remote view them, usually 3 to 6 a week games, and then Glenn would also. Because we're into football. Glenn's really knowledgeable about football too, and so Glenn would do just discretionary picks who he thought had the edge that week based on actual football knowledge and data, and then I would do completely blinded RV sessions. And yeah, we had some interesting experiences with that. Some ups and some downs. We were about we were 1 point and a couple seconds away from winning a 6-game parlay. So we got 5 out of 6 one week, and that was really exciting. And then we've had weeks where we were completely anti-psychic and we were 0 for 6, which I almost think that's as interesting in a lot of ways. So it was varied. I think we had a slight edge in the end. I'd have to run the numbers, but we did actually pick the Super Bowl finalists out of the top 4. But yeah, it was interesting. And so this year I sent out a message to our little group that we have, some of our core listeners and, friends and things. And I was like, hey, I'd love to do this with more people. And again, I'm a beginner, or I was a beginner at least last year. Even if you're a total beginner, this stuff works and it's fun. So just, if any of you are wanting to do it, hop on board. I thought like 3 or 4 people would reach out. I think we got about like 15 or 20 almost now that are going to rock with us. So talk a little bit about associative remote viewing, and maybe you could help us get straight before this starts in a month or two.
That's so cool. I after the conference, I would like to start doing more remote viewing myself. So if you need anybody, maybe like
absolutely,
that would be fun, because I used to do ARV there were times where I was doing remote viewing sessions every single day.
And you're a project manager too. So you run ARV projects where other people are viewing for you. So, you've kind of, not only do you do it, but you lead groups doing it too.
Right? Yeah. And, I'd like to just go back to just being a viewer occasionally. You can so easily get out of practice too when you're just managing. So, for me, it would just be fun to just do some targets and have
for sure. Well, yeah, we'll give you some targets. And I wanted to avoid, I kind of made a personal rule for myself this year where I want to do half the targets where I'm the judge, and then half the targets, maybe my girlfriend picks them and then I view them. So I kind of get a little experience managing, but I don't lose it, like you said.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You could really learn a lot from managing projects and seeing what other viewers are doing. And, I think it's really good to switch off roles.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get burned out doing one or the other after a while.
Interesting.
But yeah. Did you find that you'd have displacement sometimes, like where you just online?
I'm so glad. I'm glad you reminded me, because your chapter on displacement was one of the best chapters on any psi phenomena I've ever read, because it explained so much and it made me feel like I wasn't alone. And let me tell you about. There was some interesting stuff that happened. For the first half, we were doing just paper and envelopes, like actually printed out real physical things. And that seemed to work well. I feel like I got less hits, but the hits I got were more accurate in terms of predicting a game, and they were maybe weren't perfectly describing the target, but they were close enough to make a good binary prediction and everything. And then we started doing an iPad thing, and I know that a lot of people in your book that you reference have started using technology very successfully, using iPad, using tablets or computers or whatever. And I found, interestingly enough, when we started doing the iPad targets, I could view really quickly, and I just felt so tuned in, and I would just get hit after hit after hit. But they would all, or many cases, they would be totally displaced. And for people that don't know what that is, displacement is where you accurately view the wrong binary outcome, right? That's where you, like, if the Kansas City Chiefs lose, but the picture is a bucket, and you draw a bucket, and you're like, oh my God, that was such an amazing hit, but it was wrong ultimately, and it wasn't the right target. That's displacement. So yeah, once we started doing the iPad, we got a lot of displays. It was really exciting at first because I was like, oh, these are such great hits. And it was just coming so fast through me. But I kind of leaned towards doing the paper again. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. Yeah.
Well, when you say the iPad, so were you actually like drawing on the iPad or looking at what were you doing on the iPad versus the feed?
My girlfriend would use her drawing and illustrating program to have one image, like paste one image from the internet randomly chosen, and then another image distinct, like a waterfall or a building, kind of thing. And then have the target number and have the associated teams and everything. And then I would remote view it on a whiteboard. And then I would just do a couple in a row or a couple here and there. And then she would judge it basically. And pardon me. And so I wasn't using the iPad to draw, but we were using the iPad to generate and store targets, and
as opposed to like the paper and an envelope.
Yes.
Yeah. The paper and the envelope, I think, is separating out, because when you see your feedback, for the feedback, you would see it from the envelope, like she would pull it out. And so I think that it provides like a degree of separation. It's like it's storing it physically somewhere. And so that's because you have to do anything you can to separate out the actual photo attached to the outcome as opposed to the other photo. And so when they're both on the computer like that, like there are different things you could do. Like, would she ever show you the wrong photo or only the right photo?
We experimented with both. We experimented with keeping it completely blinded, Lynn Buchanan style, right? I think that's his name, right? And then there were other times when I would look at both, or she'd be like, I need help judging this, and I would do it. And I felt that seeing both didn't really throw me too much, to where I didn't necessarily agree with Lynn Buchanan. And also I was aware of, I forget his name, but the game day psychic guy he's done hundreds and thousands of NFL games. You mentioned him in your book, and he has them all archived. I think he's got like a 58% win rate over tens of thousands or thousands of trials. And he sees both and judges both instantly. And he says that doesn't affect him negatively. So I kind of was going by that, where I was, kind of seeing both. And I was just curious too, so yeah.
Yeah, I've looked at just like every single variable of, how can you decrease it. And I don't know, I do think it can help putting things in envelopes or, putting them in a different room or something like that, and I try to minimize seeing the wrong one, because I am really prone to displacement. So, and that is why now that I think back to it, why I kind of like slowed down on my own ARV work, because I was just starting to just see everything. But I think there's also, I think if you do start to get burned out, like there's a part of your subconscious, like that's, I think what was happening for me, like, because I never wanted to say no to any project, but I was, I really should have. And there were times, like even I was doing one project where I was in graduate school and I was already only getting a few hours of sleep. And then, And then I still said yes to my Igor, who runs ARV Studio in Croatia. He asked if I'd do a project with him, and I'd be late on turning my session. And so like at 1:30 a.m., I was racing to get him my session, and then I'd have 2 hours of sleep. And I was just getting displacement all over. And I would describe like what he was doing. Like I had this really detailed drawing and description of like a dad and his son going to a soccer match. And it turned out that was exactly what he was doing at the moment
Wow.
of viewing, but it had nothing to do with the photos.
Yeah.
So I was just all over the place. So I do think you really have to be like well rested and calm. And I have gotten this intuitive message at other times where I've tuned into people like through readings who were just like really so psychically clear and really clear mediums. And they're just people oftentimes that have less going on in their life. Like and I find this with myself too. Like I'm just clearer when I have less on my to-do list and less projects and less people. And, conversely, the more of that stuff you add, it's even if, you have a day off where you're not doing so much, it's like your space is just crowded and packed with stuff. And it's going to impact your psychic work, in a big way. So I think that's kind of what started to happen. But yeah, and this is something I studied with Lynn. Lynn Buchanan was one of my early teachers.
I love him.
Yeah, he's so smart. He's going to be at the upcoming conference as well.
Cool.
Doing a really great talk. And but anyway, he would say that your subconscious is always going to win out, no matter what. So what it wants, if it doesn't want to do a session and you make yourself do a session, then you're just gonna like it's not even just doing a bad job. It's, displacement can really, like you in an ARV session, you would rather do a bad job or just not get anything. You're better off like just drawing a blank as opposed to getting really good information about the wrong target. So, really throughout all of parapsychology and any kind of psychic work, it's been recognized what's called the trickster, and whether the trickster is your own subconscious or other forces that are coming in. There's just things that'll happen if you don't listen to yourself.
That's so interesting. And I know Lynn was a fan of, he was talking about how he would at first try to do remote viewing and he'd do the meditation and try and go super deep and focus. And then he's like, then I just started, I'd take my daughter to school and then I'd eat breakfast and then I'd remote view and then and he would just pepper it throughout his life and kind of took the pressure off a little bit and said his results went way up. And the variety. And when there was kind of an element of like when we were just having fun with it, not that it ever wasn't fun, but when we were like, oh, let's try this. And the results were amazing. And then we were like, oh, gotta win, and then it was like, and I think that's interesting too. Joe Gallenberger talked about that a little bit. Yeah. Kind of how, or if there's money on the line that you're uncomfortable with, we weren't really wagering a lot or anything, but it was like, how it can make you pucker up and be like, oh no, and kind of, so I thought that was interesting too.
Sure.
Yeah. So much so.
Yeah. So I had to talk about, we have to talk about this today because in the news, I'm starting to see it, right? Not just the random sites that I check for the news, but the real news that you see on TV and stuff. There's a lot of like Project Bluebeam stuff that comes out. A lot of you'll see like Wall Street Journal will be like, hey, the government or they have alien crafts on site, and I am a firm believer that there are other life forms other than us. However, I think the most boring and I would even say politically advantageous things are the linear path, like just aliens taking a linear path to us and like crashing into something and we have their ship. And I'm so much more into like the interdimensional travel, the stuff like that. So and like I said, you're in Oregon, so it's like I feel like everyone in Oregon has like seen a UFO before or something. I feel like first off, have you?
Yeah, well, actually, we just on July 4th. So what? That was just like a couple weeks ago. We live on a river, and we took our boat to Florence, which is on the Oregon coast, where they were having a fireworks display. So we took our boat like in the dark at night, and then we're coming back home, and there were all these stars out, and I'm looking up, and I was looking at a star, and I start to see a light pass by the star, and then another light and another light. And there were about 20 of these lights. And Danny, my husband, he doesn't really, he's not into this stuff, but he was looking at it, and he's a pilot, and he was like, oh my God, I am seeing, he was like, this is officially a UFO.
Right.
Because there were 20 of these and it was way high up, and and 20 of them following each other. And we've never seen anything like it, because, I mean, okay, it could be 20 planes following each other, but you wouldn't typically see that, especially at that time of night. So, not going to rule that out for sure, but yeah, they weren't blinking or anything like that. I got them on video too. So, but I would say more interdimensionally, I've had so many experiences where an alien face or hand just seemed to pop up out of nowhere when I'm doing intuitive work. And in some cases, like whatever I was doing had nothing to do with aliens. Like that was, I'm just like reading someone and their childhood, and there's like no reason to go there. And the first time it happened, like, bam, an alien face. It was like as if you're watching your TV, and suddenly an alien just like pushed the actors aside and came on and, start, hi, Glenn. It was like,
what did the face look like? What kind of alien?
it was definitely a gray with like really nasty eyes. And there's something just really cold and sinister about it. And it was like, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. And because I had just started, I was reading this guy's like childhood and just seeing some difficulties he had. And then suddenly it like switched to this scene of like, it was kind of like I was seeing a place that I thought I was looking at some kind of outdoor furniture, like, but this weird furniture. And then bam, the alien face was there. So I must have somehow tapped into some place. And so he was telling me I shouldn't be there and to get out. And it was just like, there was just something so, all I could say was like, it was so controlling, and it just gave me chills. And I was like, you know what, let's just end this here. Cause I can sometimes be like pretty relentless if I get some kind of image or something happens, like I want to keep exploring it and checking it out. But in that case, I was just like, we don't need to deal with whatever this is. And I've had other experiences too, where just like a hand popped up, and it was like this, it looked, I just somehow knew it was alien, and it was gray, and it smelled like mushrooms.
Wow.
And it was like ancient and old. And I actually had that happen when I was managing a project for, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I was, well, I won't, because he's technically a client. So I'll say it was somebody that runs a very prominent UFO related group.
Okay.
But I did not expect for that to happen. And I was in a friend's basement that I was staying at her guest house while I was finishing up graduate school. And when that happened, I just had this feeling of like such a strong presence in there. Like I didn't want to go. I ran out of there, out of the room, and I did not want to go back in there. And I had to like sometimes sleep in the house by myself. And I was just really freaked out. So, people might be like, oh, that could have been your imagination. But, I've been doing this work long enough where your images don't usually have smells, they don't just pop up like, I'm right here. So, whether that hand was just a spirit or alien, it was something. So I've just had different experiences like that have me convinced that there are these consciousnesses, and they're out there. They're, that I do occasionally feel like I'm getting a visitation. Like when I'm falling asleep at night, I'll see, I was in the Philippines. I lived there for a year, and I was in this mountain, way out mountainous place, and I laid down. I wasn't feeling very well, and went to sleep. And I woke up, and I couldn't tell if I was in a dream or if it was real, but there were like these 5 gray alien faces, like just all right on, like looking down at me, like peering at me, and I just like totally scream.
Oh,
So just experiences like that where, it wouldn't like prove anything to anybody, but it has totally got me convinced that they're there. And I do really feel like they're very interested in people that are telepathically,
yeah.
trained, or
Mm,
they're very interested in people who can perceive them. And I do feel like they kind of will play around with people to, see like, can they think something and then you hear their thoughts, or, can they influence things? But we have to be so careful. Like, I kind of hesitate in talking about these things because, there's such a line for people who, some people are like having mental challenges, and
yeah.
it's so easy to just get paranoid, like,
Sure.
oh, is
Yeah.
someone trying to control my brain? And, it could really feed into all sorts of delusions and hallucinations too. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
be
like
discerning.
like what Glenn said, you both tapped on it, on how, the idea of just an alien showing up in our physical reality is like, I do believe that happens, but that is kind of the boring thing. The interesting thing is interdimensionally, or just in our consciousness, or through dreams, like really vivid dreams and stuff, where they're probably the least interesting thing for an advanced alien probably is to just show up and be like, hey, because that's the interesting thing would be like, okay, who on earth is kind of on this vibe, who's on this wavelength,
Yeah.
and yeah, and there are those experiences of people that I had a friend, I had a friend, I haven't talked to her in a while. Her and her husband, she had an abduction dream, and she woke up in the middle of like a forest fairy ring. She's outside of Santa Cruz, or not, no surprises there. Crazy stuff goes
Always.
down out there. Yeah, and so she had this abduction dream. Woke up in this redwood fairy ring, a couple like 100 yards from her house or so. We tried to go back into her house. It's like 3 a.m. All the doors were locked from the inside, and there was no sign of entry or exit. And then she woke up her husband and was like, "How did I get out here?" And then she had she had this upper back pain a couple weeks later, and we all worked together, her and my mom and everything. And she went in to get to the free clinic to get surgery, and sorry, I got a visitor right here. Yeah,
Interdimensional traveler.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And they took out a like a stamped metal little silver thing from her upper back, and it was like a straight up alien implant, and it was like the size of a pinky nail, very small, and it was super bright silver. It was like the brightest silver metal I'd ever seen, and it looked like a flattened Snickers bar, like with the edges kind of crinkled like that. And it had 3 symbols stamped on it, and one of them was like a Jesus fish, one of them, and then 2 other symbols I don't remember, but it was just 1, 2, 3, and it was just like I could just picture like a straight scanner, like boop, just like a little indicator or something, and
Tagged.
tagged. It happened like 3 weeks after she woke up outside her house with no, yeah. So I mean, stuff is real, and like it blends the line between physicality and
People would,
consciousness.
and there would be a skeptic, right?
Mhm.
And what I mean is a skeptic, not even so much of a you made it up, but some people could say that was our own government. There's MK Ultra, there's real things, that experiments that have happened, that to where people go, well, that's not proof of this. That's actually proof of this could have been an experiment done by humans on other, certain things. But not needless to say, there's more and more and more people who not only have gone through what your friend had gone through, but also remember seeing, the entities and things like that, which is, like our friend that called in a couple times. I mean, he's been absolutely haunted by cryptids. And he's in the Appalachian area, which that is like a huge hotbed over there. It's every bit as much as Oregon, or if not more. But he just, for his family, they're not real into aliens or the stuff we're into, but they notice something's going on. And he's had a couple times where something's whacked him, or one time where something whacked him upside of the head, and it was a big, large creature and stuff. These things are out there, These things are out there. I don't know. I just
Yeah, I'd love to hear more. Was he on your show? I'd love to hear more about
So he did a couple of voicemails. We have a hotline that we do but just kind of a tribute to the late great Art Bell, where we have a hotline where people can call in and just anything they thought was weird, and stuff. And he called in once with a kind of an older story, just, hey, I've always wanted to tell this. And then he had a follow-up encounter. And this was another time where he was kind of on his back porch, and it just something in his backyard. He heard laughing and something, and he kind of jumped out and was like, who's there? Who's there? And it saw like almost deer type jumping away, but it was clearly something that could laugh and and things like that. So there's spooky stuff out there. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I'd like to think when you hear his voice and you hear him talk about it, it's like, this dude's not making it up. It's just like, it's very, I feel like we all have like a pretty good internal litmus of like,
you know what? I think I might be able to play the voicemail for you. Actually, I think I'll do it. Should I play it?
Yeah.
I have it. Let me just give me 1 second. I don't see why not. Who cares if the listeners are tired of it? But it was just a couple of weeks ago. All right, here we go. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hey, it's me again. I just had another experience that I kind of wish I wouldn't have had. So, me and my girlfriend were out on our back porch last night. It was storming and we were watching a storm, and lightning and thunder and raining, and it's pretty loud. And we're sitting here enjoying the night, and then all of a sudden it gets like dead quiet, and both of us, we have our dog out here too, and both of us look at each other and go, something's off. Like something has just changed. It was lightning and thundering, and now it's completely dead silent. And I yell at my dog to come back, and as soon as I do, like in the far corner of my backyard, we got like about an acre backyard, and in the far corner of the backyard we hear very clear human laughing. And so my girlfriend grabs the dog, goes inside, and I run out to where it was because I'm a moron, and I yell, who the fuck is out here? And it laughs again, and then I hear something sprinting through the field, but like the steps had to have been 5, 10, like way too far apart. It was like a deer leaping or something like that, but I know it wasn't. Well, there's this week's Appalachian horror story. Hope I don't call back soon.
You can hear it, and I feel bad. I know he's a real, good. He's been listening to us for a long time. A good guy, comes from a good family. You can tell, and I don't like. I can tell it shakes him up, but I don't know. Is it all? It doesn't seem as. I hope it's not like evil. You know what I mean? Like I hope it's not just pure evil. I mean, because that it could be misconstrued as like, well, we'll toy with somebody, like it could be like toying with somebody, and one person's joke might be another person's, a horror story, right? Like, I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, well, it could, and maybe it's laughing, but there's just, it may not be that they're laughing at him, it like you say, it could be misinterpreted, or it could sound like laughing, but it's, something else.
They're laughing with you. Yeah, not at you. Yes. Right. Yeah.
It's not even laughing. Like it sounds like laughing, and it could still be, a weird creature, but it just, that's how they talk. They sound like they're laughing.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell, but I definitely believe those things are out there for sure. And, it's always interesting too. These make really interesting targets to remote view like that. That could be a great target, like to have, and of course you might, some viewers don't like to do what's called esoteric targets, meaning like you may not be able to get feedback, but I think it's helpful if you have a group of people tune into it, and then you could see how closely their sessions conform with each other. And, there's been quite a bit of that. I've managed projects and been part of projects like where people were describing what's on the moon or what's on Mars, and or the latest is we have a I don't know if you know who Des Smith is.
Yeah, I love Des Smith. Yeah.
He's
he's been viewing a long time, right? He's kind of old school. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
he's got a really big website, and he's been around for a long time and has some really good books. And so he got a hold of an early project that Ingo Swann had done with a couple military remote viewers and some other people, and got the sessions for where they were tuning into Roswell. And then he had also tuned into Roswell as a viewer himself. And then I had my students tune into it, and then a couple other viewers. And so this was like spanning over like the last 30 years, different viewers who had all tuned into the same thing. And then we got all the transcripts, and then we've been compiling them. I had an assistant compile them all into like one spreadsheet, and we're still in the process of analyzing it. But it's just really interesting, because then you could do like a thematic breakdown to see, well, how many viewers, describe like something that sounded like a UFO or life forms or things like that. And most of the time, the viewers were blind to the target, so they didn't know it was Roswell. They just got, a number connected to it. So I think in a lot of ways, this is one of our best shots of having an understanding into some of these paranormal things, by having multiple viewers, tune in. And there's some downsides to that too, because sometimes, and this is something that Daz has looked at in a few others, is what's called tasker's intent. Or like if let's say your friend thought it was Bigfoot that was in his backyard, is it possible that all the viewers could tune into the concept of Bigfoot just because he thinks it's Bigfoot? Or are they really tuning into what was actually there? Now, there's some ways that you could kind of task or direct viewers to have a better chance of not tuning into what he thinks it is, but what's really there. But you might say you can never be totally sure if you're delineating between the two. But I think you can, at least I think that's our best hope to having an understanding of some of these
That would
things.
be interesting. I bet you he would be okay with us doing that. He seems pretty open with us maybe using that experience as a way to do that. I'm sure he listens, so I'll let him decide. But so tying this all together, and again, thank you so much for your time. This has been great. But tying this all together, I had one last question, and hopefully I'm able to even ask it correctly. But I know that there's so many ancient civilizations. I mean, there's people that have used remote viewing, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, to find out that maybe we had life on Mars at some point. Like there's been, that's Lynn, right? I think that was Lynn Buchanan or somebody that did that. But there were all sorts of ancient civilizations that wanted to face certain constellations or stars in the sky or something. Do you think this psychic ability is connected to like outer space at all? Like, is there anything that can be channeled from the, because we don't know what's out there,
Yeah, well, Ingo Swann, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was really critical to the government programs that he really helped get them funded and launched, both from his psychic work and research work. And he's really the person who coined the term remote viewing in the 1970s. And
he was like crazy talented too, right? Just like insanely talented telekinesis and remote viewer and stuff. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and he is also famous for having been the first psychic to describe the rings of Jupiter. And so he knew he was looking at, so there was the telescope that was going to be bringing back pictures in several months into the future. And so he wanted to see if he could get information that wasn't currently known to people and then have it verified months later. And he saw that there were rings, and Carl Sagan and other scientists were given his sessions and in advance of the photos coming back, and they were just like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. There's no rings on Jupiter. And then sure enough, the telescope showed that yes, there are rings on Jupiter. So I think that's,
I love that story.
it's an excellent example of, we can use remote viewing and our psychic abilities to get information about things that our technology can't yet understand. And, I feel like that's really true with so much of the paranormal world as well. And unfortunately, though, like I've found this in a lot of the projects I've carried out, because I've done a lot of informal and formal scientific projects, and you always run into this dilemma where you have people, like, you want to be able to learn from the sessions. So, we want to learn what was in that guy's backyard, or, where does a virus come from, or how does a virus replicate? That was one project that I worked on. And then we had scientists come and try to, we wanted to see if scientists could learn from what the viewers had to say. But then you always run into the problem that everyone then wants to turn it into how correct are the viewers.
Right.
So
Yeah.
how do you learn from sessions where you're also viewing them with, are these correct or not? Because how can you say they're correct if there's these things you don't know, right? So there's always this dilemma. And then there's this tendency to just throw away the data that doesn't conform to what you know. And that's the data, that's what you wanted to know in the first place. So you can never get away from that, I guess, unless you have people analyzing the sessions that are like so much trusting, the information that comes out of them. The problem is that viewers can be wrong, even the best viewers. And I've studied different archives now, Ingo Swann's archives, Ed May's Stargate archives at Rice University just a couple months ago. And no matter what the government documents you look at, the reports on remote viewing, like the research studies, everything shows like how successful remote viewing can be. And it tends to be a intuitive modality that's more successful than really any other modality out there. At least the proof is there that it is. But no project has ever, really been large scale project has come out where there wasn't a degree of wrong information, of errors, of distortions, so even the greatest psychics, they still have distortions. They have times where they're wrong. Not all the data is going to be correct. And, because of that, it just sometimes makes it hard to just trust those unknowns. But, this is the same thing. I'm sure if you talk to an intelligence analyst, who's talking about any type of, intelligence collection, not psychic, but any kind, they're going to say that there's the same problem there, right? Like,
100%.
Are your spies giving you the right information? Can we trust our sources? And sometimes things can fail really big, but that doesn't mean they don't keep trying.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, that's how Lynn Buchanan would always say that. He would say that the military never just went off of what I viewed. They would always use it as a reference. Now, if his remote viewing lined up with what, just the regular people, the general or whatever, anybody that was going to conduct what was going to happen, if it lined up with there, it was all systems go, because we viewed it. This is also our opinion. That now, if there's difference between the two, it's kind of back to the drawing board. Kind of, okay, what are we missing here? And I like what you said there. It's like, even when people say so and so, he's a psychic, he's never wrong. It's like, well, no, he probably is from time to time. Yeah.
There is no one, not like, you could take the very best person in the whole world, and they're just going to be occasionally have, they tune into the wrong thing, or they just distort data, or they just don't get something. But, even that, like, sometimes all it takes is just a little clue, like, go look over there, instead of over there. And then searchers go, and, it might take them a little longer if they don't have all the data, but, it doesn't always take like, tons of information. And remote viewers can start getting into like providing pages and pages of data. And the more data you provide, the more likelihood there is going to be some things wrong in it. But, sometimes all you just need is one little kernel of information you didn't have before, and it's going to, get you what you want or what you're looking for.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Debra, thank you so much for your time. Now, before we go, just let everybody know about all the stuff you have coming up once again, and where to find your books, where to find you on the internet and all that.
Sure. Yeah, well, people can find me at my name, DebraKatz.com, if they want to know about my school, and you can learn about my books there or on Amazon. Just Google Debra Lynne Katz books. And then also, I am managing or organizing a joint conference between International Remote Viewing Association and the Monroe Institute. And that will be, if you go to PsiFest2023.com, that's what we're calling it this year, so PSI Fest2023.com, or just go to the International Remote Viewing Association website and you'll see the link. And it is going to be online in addition to in person. So it's a hybrid conference. And yeah, so people can sign up for it at the last minute too if you can't make it. But there's going to be Lynn Buchanan's going to be speaking, Paul Smith, Monroe brain researchers, like they're actually going to plug my brain into an EEG, and I in the audience are going to remote view, and they're going to see if my brain waves change while I'm
Whoa.
it. So that's going to be kind of cool. I'm a little nervous because, if
I would be too.
Yeah.
it's going to be a little embarrassing. Going to need to really focus there, but it's got to keep challenging yourself. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll be doing a talk if I get my PowerPoint presentation together in time. So and we're going to have a talent show, and we're going to have all sorts of fun things. So bars every night, parties every night for sure. Cool. So check that out. Yeah. And it'll be on the East Coast, so it's a little bit of a haul for some people, but check that out too, International Remote Viewing Association. And what else? I think that's about it.
Okay. Well, sounds good.
And you might help us ARV some NFL games this year too. We'll keep you in the loop on that. I'd love that. That'd be
very
amazing.
fun. I think we definitely. Last year it was just him versus me. I think it'd be cool to have a team. Like a team.
That's great. Yeah, volunteer.
That would be great. Well, that's it for us. Everybody have a safe week. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.